everybody, Armoured Pants here, and I have another video for you. This is a premium tier 10 tank, the Chieftain Mk.6, and it's in the British line. And we're going to have a look at the complete details and give you a complete guide on this tank. This is actually a subscriber request video. One of the forums I'm on, Banana Republic, Blitz Banana Republic, which is mainly a lot of South African guys, pretty cool guys and gals. One of the guys on there asked me if I had a video about this tank, and I thought I had, but it turns out I hadn't. So I thought, why the hell not? Why shouldn't I do this video, get it out there, especially as it comes to a request. I'm always happy to help you guys. Before that, just like to draw your attention to the fact that we recently launched a Discord channel for this YouTube channel, so please come and join us there. You'd be very, very welcome. A lot of cool tankers and other YouTubers on there, and there's going to be a link in the description. Now, as always, we're going to have a look at the tech spec, and we're going to use blitzhanger.com to do that. Before though, let's talk about buying this tank, right? It's an expensive premium tank. It can range anything from $30 to $60 depending on what way Wargaming are offering it. So it is expensive. You need to think about it before you buy it, make sure it's right for you. In terms of credit coefficient, which is always important for a premium tank, it has 140%. Not that high compared to some of the tier 8 premiums, but it is the second highest in tier 10. Now this is a great tank, I really like it, but it can be difficult to play. The main reason for that is that it's not a traditional heavy tank, and if you do play it as a traditional heavy tank, because it lacks, for example, the frontal armour of a traditional heavy, you can come a cropper and you may not like it. But if you play to its strengths, and this tank has some amazing strengths, this can be a very, very effective tank and one that will serve you well. Now, one of the key strengths it has is that it has HESH. Now, because it's a premium tank, you may never have played a British tank before, but yet you can buy this, and therefore you may not be familiar with HESH shells. They are something different. They have a lot of advantages, but they also have some disadvantages, and you need to know those characteristics to play them well. So therefore I thought it would be a good idea to include in this video a HESH mini tutorial. So I'm going to hand you over to the experts now for that, and then I will see you back for the tech spec.
HESH High Explosive Squash Head, Heat High Explosive Anti-Tank. These two rounds first saw use in World War II. For these ammo types, distance or kinetic energy are not a factor once they reach their target. HESH is a slow-speed round that uses concussive explosive energy to damage the interior of the target. HESH contains a thin casing with a plastic explosive that flattens against the target before exploding. Once the round is partially squashed, the plastic explosive ignites. The concussive energy transfers through, and pieces of the armor or equipment inside become the destructive elements. Heat contains an inverted cone-shaped charge with a metallic liner. Once the round reaches the target, it detonates, creating a molten metal hypersonic jet. This explosively formed penetrator requires standoff distance to form its maximum penetrating power. Research has shown the more angled the cone is, the more concentrated the jet becomes, increasing its force and penetration distance. Advances in technology have mitigated these effects, such as explosive reactive armor and composite armor with ceramic plates and other materials. Spaced or slat armor also reduces the effects due to causing premature detonation.
So I hope you got all that, guys. If you didn't, just rewind it, play it again. In terms of the provisions for this tank, I would use tea inputting and improved fuel that maxes out its performance in terms of view range, gun handling, etc. It has this 120mm gun, has an 8.1 second reload with calibrated shells, and I would recommend you use calibrated shells on this because its pen isn't so high, but also because of those HESH rounds. APCR gives you 273mm of pen. Now the Pramo is also APCR, so we're going to call it Pramo. That has 326, and the HESH has 121mm of pen, and that's going to give you 400, 360 and 515 damage points respectively across those three types of shells. Now the muzzle velocity is 1784 meters per second with APCR, 1755 meters per second with the Pramo APCR, but it's only 872 meters per second with HESH. That's a 54% reduction. It's less than half the speed. Now the gun index is 21.5, which is superb when you consider that a Grail has a gun index of around 20, right? But with HESH, that gun index, the gun handling falls by half to 10.5, over half. So you need to take note of that. So the gun handling is significantly different when you fire HESH rounds. So therefore, shell selection, shell management is key. The maneuverability or mobility index is 3.5, which is very good for a heavy, and that's one of this tank's key strengths and why we describe it as a heavium. And we're going to look at that in a bit of detail later on, and also in the gameplay that we're going to have a look at. And both the games we have are going to show the strengths of this tank played to the max. Now, in terms of concealment numbers, you also need to take note of this, right? A tank with a range of 306 meters is going to spot you up within 251 meters if you're still, or 263.5, almost 264 meters when you're moving. What does that mean? Well, that means you're going to get spotted up early and often in this tank. A light tank or a medium tank with a superior view range to the other team is going to spot you up. Therefore, you need to be aware of that, particularly in the opening sequence of the game when you are moving around the map. Now, this is something that you need to be aware of because, if you get spotted up and a big gun like a Death Star or something has a bead on you from the other side of the map, it can cause all sorts of problems. So just be aware of that, particularly at the start of the game. Now, in terms of armor profile, this tank is really great in terms of its turret. Its turret is superb. It also has this 10 degrees of gun depression and has 20 degrees of elevation, right? So that means that it has a really, really good gun alignment capability, right? And that means that, this tank is effectively a hull down monster. The only really part of it that's vulnerable if you're hull down is that cupola, which you can see here in the top. Looks like a little cowboy hat or something, right? That is vulnerable. That can be penned. But it's a very, very small target, and if you're rolling back and forth, very, very difficult to hit. But just be aware though, you do have a vulnerable point even if you're hull down. But overall, it's almost impossible to pen. You can also side scrape in this tank. The relative iron numbers on the side, if you go to a side scraping position, are awesome. It also has this vulnerable part here, this spaced armor here, which is going to block HESH and HE shells on the side. Now, here's the vulnerable part, the back. 25 millimeters of armor on the butt of this tank. That is not good. Everything can penetrate you. You're like, the most pennable thing on the map from the back. Your butt is just open. It's hunting season all game long for the whole 7 minutes on your ass. Be careful. Even the smallest caliber gun can pen you with HE from behind. You need to be very aware of that and keep your butt hidden if possible. If you're in a brawling situation, you need to use the maneuverability of the tank to keep your butt away, but this tank is mobile. It has great traverse, it has good power to weight ratio. It is possible. The other thing about this tank, for those of you who like the historical aspect of Blitz, is this is a real tank. It came into production in the early 60s. I think it was released in 63, and it was used up until the mid 80s, so it had a long lifespan. And over 2,500 of these tanks were produced, and it is a very, very effective main battle tank. So, it's always good when there's a historical overlap with Blitz, and I know that some tank historians really love to play Blitz for that reason, and this is an actual tank, so it's not one of those fantasy tanks. Although, obviously, its handling characteristics are different in the game than they would be in the real world. Now, in this game here, what we're going to have a look at is the mobility of this tank. So, as I said, it's a helium. So what does a helium mean? If you're unfamiliar with that phrase, it basically means it's sort of a cross between a heavy and a medium, in that it's extremely mobile, it has good power to weight ratio, so it can get around the map. And you're going to see that in this game. We move around the map, and we move around the map really well. Just going to pause it here for a second, by the way. I'm just going to explain to you what I'm doing here. And this is what I often do on this map, especially if I have a gun which has a decent reload, so you can just fire a shot on spec. Very often you see a tank sitting on the opposite side of the map, regardless of where you spawn, just sitting there on the tracks waiting to spot up, or you have a really big gunned TD waiting there. So I always, if I have a fast loading gun system, I always fire a shot on spec. Because why not? Once when I was in a waffle tractor sitting there, a guy did the same thing to me in a T30 with a HE round, and he hit me for over 1,000 hit points. So always worth a pump if you've got a fast loading gun. Now here I want to show you this shell selection. We spoke about the difference in muzzle velocity, right? Now chances are the HESH round would go through the standard B at that distance front on because of the pen, right? But the muzzle velocity is so slow, it's going to take over twice as long to arrive at the destination. So that's why I chose APCR. I want to get that almost 1800 meter per second muzzle velocity in action so that I hit the target, right? So what I'm doing is I'm trading off the possible 100 additional hit points I can get by using HESH to make sure that I hit, right? So to me, it's simple probability, simple mathematics, right? If you can guarantee 400 hit points, whereas maybe you're thinking 60-70% possibility of hitting with the HESH round, go for the guaranteed, right? Bird of the hand is worth two in the bush and all that, right? So shell management is extremely important in this tank because there's just such a huge difference between the muzzle velocities. You're going to see another example of it here. I'm going to slow it right down, right? Now, here on the shot on the VK, right? Bam! Now the muzzle velocity on this tank is superb for APCR, right? Either for both the standard and the Pramo, right? It's almost one of the highest in Blitz, which is why the gun handling index is so good, right? Better than the grill. But you need to be aware that that's not with all shells, and if you're not aware of that and you rotate through your shells and fire a HESH round there, it probably wouldn't have hit the VK because the VK was moving, right? Because it's going to take twice as long to get there. So just be aware of that, guys, you know, be aware of your shell management. Now, what you're going to see here is a sequence of play you would more associate with a medium tank, right? I'm kind of circling and deathing him here, kind of semicircle of death, right? And this is the maneuverability of this tank, right? Now you're not as maneuverable as a medium or light tank, right? Don't get me wrong, right? Your turret traverse is slower, etc. But if you're up against a heavy tank, a slow-moving, ponderous heavy tank like this, you can circle and death him. You have that maneuverability, right? So just be aware of that. That's one of the key strengths of this tank, right? There are very few heavy tanks at tier 8 you could do this with, right? Of course, the IS-7 is also quite maneuverable, etc. But you know, you can play this tank, you know, very, very well, leveraging that maneuverability it has. Now, while I'm moving in to engage these remaining reds, let's talk about why this tank can be difficult to play. If you play heavy tanks, and you buy this and play it as a traditional heavy, you probably won't do very well, right? The reason being that it is not a pure traditional type heavy tank, right? Again, just look at that gun index and action there. The gun system of this tank is superb. You know, it's going to deliver time and time again. But as we were saying, this tank is not a traditional heavy tank. So if you play it as a traditional heavy tank, particularly like if you play it like one of the big Germans or big Russians, heavily armed tank like the IS-40, 100, you're going front line, tip of the spear. You're basically playing the heavy tank role as we suggest you play it in the heavy tank guide. By the way, if you haven't watched that, I would recommend you do so. It's in the advanced game playlist, so have a look at that. But if you play this on using in that role, you won't do well, because when you go frontline this thing, you don't have the frontal armor to bounce shots, right? So, and then you'll find how you'll be saying to yourself, "God, this tank is rubbish, right? I'm playing it, and I just get penned all the time, etc." And yeah, you're right, you will be getting penned, because you don't have the frontal armor of the big German or the big Chinese or the big Russian heavy tanks. Right. Also, because of your speed and power to weight ratio, you probably get to that strategic point of the map before your allies, and therefore you are going to be not just the tip of the spear, but the tip of the spear, and you're going to be taking a lot of punishment. And this tank isn't built for that. And I think that's why a lot of people find it difficult to play, because they see it as a heavy. They try to play it as they played other heavies, and they're getting penned, and they're not bouncing shots, and they get frustrated. You need to play this tank differently. You need to play it to its strengths, and those strengths are basically threefold, right? One is its mobility, its ability to get around the map and get into positions. Secondly, it's that turret and the gun depression, so get hull down. And thirdly is that gun system, which is just awesome. With the caveat, of course, that you need to be aware of the decreased muzzle velocity when you're playing HESH. Now, in this game here, I wanted to show you this game for a couple of reasons. One, it's a great demonstration of the two of the main characteristics of this tank, two of its main positive advantages, and that is its mobility, which you're going to see here, and it's when it goes hull down, how effective it is, and the utilization of the gun system when hull down. Now, one interesting thing about this game is, I'm going to pause it here for a second, right? Look at the mini-map, right? Our mediums, our fast movers have not moved. They are not doing their job. They haven't spotted anybody. Look at the mini-map. We don't know where any of the reds are. Their object 140, which we just see in the brow of the hill now, is doing his job. He spots me up, plus a whole load of others, right? So the reds are going to know where we are. We don't know where they are. Again, you know, this is why you need to understand the role of your tank when you're playing. So if you're playing a medium or light tank, guys, please, you know, watch my guide on that in the advanced playlist, how to play mediums, how to play lights, or some other YouTubers. There's a lot of great YouTubers out there, but please watch somebody, because, you know, this is what happens when you don't do your job. See, look at the hits I took there. Why? Because I'm trying to do the job of the medium tank. I'm trying to get to C here. I'm trying to do the spotting, right? Which I do in the end effectively, right? And you took a bit of punishment to get there, but seizing this point in the map was key, and you're going to see why, right? This game, I get a first class mastery badge. I get over 1500 XP, so it's close to a mastery badge, but I only did something over 2000 damage, right? But why? Because I was able to get so much XP because of my assistance, because of my team play, right? Because I spotted up the enemy, because I did things like this, right? Watch this, right? I carefully choose my shot and I track that E100, and look what happens next. Boom! Look at that shot. Boom! Now, when he came into this passage here, he had over 2,500 hit points, and about 12 seconds later, he's gone from the game. And you know, I was going to go into clear him. I didn't need to. Now look at the damage with my assistance that's been done already, right? Now look at my meds here. Obviously, guys are being inexperienced, whatever. They're just not doing their jobs. They don't really know what their job is. But with this tank, you can, if necessary, do things like this. You know, this is me hull down here, and I'm getting this massive bounce from the waffle tractor. You know, I put a round into him, utilizing the gun system, utilizing the strengths that we spoke about, the strong turret, the gun depression, the excellent gun system. And you know, because of the speed of this tank and this maneuverability, you can do things like I'm doing in this game. So, you know, it may not seem this way, you know, when you're watching this game, if you don't understand Blitz, but in actuality, my actions at the start of this game, going across to get C, to spot up the enemy, led to us having a much better team performance and probably winning the game. And I don't say this in terms of, you know, hey, look at me, how brilliant I am. I mean, there's nothing I do here which is spectacular, right? I haven't really done anything amazing, right? There's nothing gifted here in this game. But look at the damage of my assistance now, well over 4k of damage. So that's my contribution to my team right now. So, you know, it's the damage that I've blocked, which is whatever here, 640. The damage that I've contributed to through my actions, which is well over 4k, plus the 2k I do. So I've contributed, directly or indirectly, almost 7k of damage in this game. And Blitz is a team game, guys, right? You can't win it on your own. You need to think about your teammates. But this tank allows you to do far more actions. It allows you to influence a game far more than a standard heavy tank, because of its maneuverability and because of its ability to do things like seizing the strategic position on this map here at C, capturing the base, spotting up the enemy, and really contributing towards team performance as a whole. I don't think I do actually any more damage in this game, so I'm moving towards A here, so this game is more or less over. We've won now, we've cleared them off. You may have noticed, by the way, when I tracked the E100, Death Star said good game, and you know, he really understood you know, the role I was playing as a teammate, and that's just how good players are, and how good players, you know, acknowledge, you know, when they see something being done right within the team. You know, so, and be tracking that E100 there, you know, as I said, this, if I had just, you know, fired one round into him, we would have done 400 damage. By tracking him, keeping him in place there for those extra few seconds, we cleared him off. One of the most dangerous tanks on their team. And he went, as I said, from having 2,500 plus hit points to being gone in the space of a few seconds. And again, we look at the so there's the first class mastery badge. As I said, it's only 2.2k damage, right? But look at the XP. The XP is just off the charts. It's over 1.5k of XP, and that's down to those that assistance. And I guess the point is twofold. Firstly, it shows how effective this tank can be if you play to its strengths. But secondly, that Blitz is a team game. You don't always have to do huge damage to make a huge contribution. You know, and if you can take that lesson from this video, then that would be fantastic. I'd be very, very happy, because it is a team game and you need to play to your strengths but also the strengths of your teammates. But of course, part of that is understanding your own tank and understanding the things that it can do and the things it can't do. We've discussed what this tank can't do, and we've also now discussed what it can do. So, you know, utilize that mobility, utilize that position as hold down. Don't play it as a traditional heavy tank. Play it more as a support vehicle for your mediums, or to go into a position where you can get hull down on the map, or in the case of the last game, if your own mediums are not doing their job well, you can maybe help them out and do some of their work, lift some of the load there with those guys. But please also be aware of the fact of the concealment numbers that this tank has. You saw when I was moving towards C in that last game, I got hit twice on the way because I got spotted up because of those concealment numbers, and because my medium tanks hadn't spotted up the enemy, I took those hits. So please be careful of your movement, especially in the opening sequence of the game. Now, let's have a recap. So, you know, you don't play this as a standard heavy because it's not one, and if you do, you probably won't have a good game and you won't enjoy it, right? So you need to be aware of its limitations and of its advantages. You need to play to its strengths, right? Its turret, its mobility, and that gun system, you know, are phenomenal. Play to those strengths, right? But don't play it as a frontline heavy, because you've got an excellent toolbox in that gun depression, turret, mobility, and gun system. And of course, you have the HESH for extra damage. Just bear in mind, of course, about the decrease in muzzle velocity. So you've got an extra toolbox, so use it. You know, it's a hold down monster, as we saw, and as we discussed. And with the gun system, if you get into a position like that, it is a formidable opponent. But as I said again, please note the muzzle velocity takes over twice as long to reach your target with a HESH shell. So while HESH is magnificent for doing extra damage, you need to be aware of that so that you're not wasting shots by missing. I would run calibrated shell, supercharged, refined gun on this to max out that gun handling system and to utilize the HESH as well. And just be aware, guys, that this is a Heavium, right? It's a great tank, it's great fun. You have far more options with this tank than you do with a standard heavy tank. But don't play as a standard heavy tank and don't think that it is, because otherwise you will be doing yourself and this tank a disservice. So cheers much, thanks for watching. I hope you found it enjoyable, I hope you found it useful, and I guess now all that remains for me to say is pants off.
That's all, folks.